different types of personalities, and I and data compression via the use of names, which we use to compress dense information into small titles, and hence misunderstandings ensue. But then I thought, let's try and wonder about assassinations and what do they do in general, and what do they do specifically. So I thought to myself, let's start with some that I could think of. One was Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 by a right-wing Jewish extremist who, even though Yitzhak Rabin himself was maybe more what you call today's society maybe more left-leaning, relatively speaking, and the result of his death was, of course, the standard human psychological backlash of emergence of chaos and how to deal with that by establishing order. And so hence there's already a push towards more of a right-wing style government in that particular case. Then I thought to myself, Olaf, I forget his last name, in Sweden in 1986. And if I remember correctly, the country went further to the right. I made some notes, actually, if I can find them anywhere. Excuse me for a moment. So we've got Yitzhak Rabin, Olaf Palme, that's right, in Sweden. He was a social democrat, and he was assassinated. That was unsolved, but the country moved to the right in that particular case as well. But then there was someone, 1992 in the Netherlands. I forget how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. I had it somewhere here. Yeah, Pim Fortuyn. So he was anti-establishment, right-wing, anti-immigration. And he was assassinated by, I'm pretty sure, a animal rights activist. And that caused a double backlash, because first you have that Pim becomes a martyr for the cause, which happened to be right-leaning. But then you also have the backlash or the instability that's created, and so people's request or demand for security. And so that is a double push to the right, and that's exactly what happened in the Netherlands. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. So if you look at Martin Luther King, for example, but because he was so loved, that his death actually allowed for, I think it was the 1968 instantiation of the Civil Rights Movement, or the Civil Rights Act. I don't know exactly the details of that, but you would know if you live in the US. But and there's Benazir Bhutto, who was murdered, I think, by her own guards, and they were Sikh because of her desecration of the Sikh temple. But her centre-left party was elected. But in general, that's not the case. So you have like the president of Chile somewhere in 1980, who was assassinated by people who were backed by the American CIA. And Augusto Pinochet, took his place, and that became a right-wing authoritarian state. And the constitution was amended, from which they never recovered as of yet. Then you've got Anwar Sadat in 1980, and even after him, I think, and Hosni Mubarak, which led to 20 years of a right-wing dictatorship. In Israel, after Yitzhak Rabin, as I said, you had the rise of the Likud party, and of course, the further and further and further gone to the right, which of course escalates violence on both sides. I mean, it's not necessarily about being right. It can happen the other way as well. But then I researched a list of the top 100 assassinations, and luckily we've got AI that can help us with those things. And it said on average it skews to the right. So then you look at the assassination of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March. When was that? 44 BC? I don't remember. And you start to figure out what happens in the short term, medium term, and long term. So in America, I tried to apply all of those different things, especially with my years of living in the Middle East and the understanding of what happens with authoritarian movements when they win and after they win. So this is important to look at, and you can also include the Bolshevist movement that took over from the Romanovs, I think in 1914 in Russia, and then brought in, of course, the extreme left-wing communist movement. So, I mean, there was a Nazi case too, but I don't like to use Nazi cases because, everyone uses those. Yeah, the rightward shift follows. So I thought to myself, how can I apply this to what's happened with the current assassination, and given the current US climates? And what I saw in the Middle East over a long period of time, not only the leading up to the taking over of a country by an authoritarian regime that uses the martyrdom as fuel, but what happens afterwards. So in the next 72 hours, you'll probably see like martyrdom, sanctification, um, the fueling of the movement by the sympathizers of that movement, plus a greater population that might have been semi-sympathizers. And you'll get things like, I mean, you've already started to hear Patriot. This is just an analysis. You don't have to pick a side. I'm not interested really in picking sides in this case. I'm more analyzing, for those of you who know me, humans, as most of my life I felt distant in general from humanity, given many reasons about which many of you know, and one day I'll share with most people. The narrative will quickly switch in right-wing spheres to a war on Christianity. Whether that's justified or not, I'm not here to say, but it will be believed. And as I've said many times on Periscope, it's less about what's happening and more about what people believe is happening, and that's what motivates people. And so once you recognize that or make that assumption, then predictions become a lot easier, and you're less surprised with outcomes that are made. So of course the speculation is going to begin and conspiracy theories will begin. So people will say that it was a China-sponsored assassin in order to provoke the tension of the Cold War in the US. You're going to have people saying it was a left-wing person or someone from California. You're going to have someone say it was a right-wing person done in-house in order to gain more votes. In fact, once people find out who it is, if they do, it's probably going to be secondary to whatever people's beliefs already are, which are manifesting in their minds. If you are like myself, who's highly analytical, you'll probably see these patterns happening. Most people won't, I think. My experience is most people won't. They'll probably get into whatever narrative they believe is happening and stick with that as the reality, as opposed to an emergent reality from datum, which you can do in general as a human. That's what we do, actually. We look at emergent phenomena from data and construct narratives, and that's how we sort of understand the world. Now, short to medium term is a powerful rallying cry for the right. Now, a tree grow or a knee grow? Oh, that's terrible. That's a terrible joke. Oh, wow. Okay, I guess you got to expect that on YouTube. So, can I? Oh, cool, I can remove a person. Sorry, I had to remove that because if I don't remove that, people are going to think that somehow I agree with these racist comments, which I absolutely do not. So I'm sorry, Levi, I had to get rid of you. Okay, so what am I thinking next? The impossible position comes next because immediately, if you are a left-leaning person in America, you are going to have to empathize with, hello, Artie man, you're going to have to empathize with the victims. You're going to have to, there's no question, because what happened was a murder. Oh, good, just a joke, sorry. No, that's okay. So here is the problem. There is no Democrat in America who will be able to say that this person's ridiculous or taunting or provocative or evil statements, they can't say that. It'll never happen. So they have to say, we are against the killers. Unfortunately, what I think will happen from this is an onslaught of new laws, and these will be supported by not just the base of the right wing, but sort of a greater community, or at least tolerated. And that will allow for a pushing towards more of an authoritarian regime. I think the long-term social consequences will be that people within the spheres, let's just call it Christian nationalist spheres for now, will feel genuinely, I think, threatened by people on what they will call the left. They will think that they are evil sinners, complicit in murder. Not everyone, of course, but this type of narrative will rise. And it's understandable. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm not going to say someone's right or not to think that. Now, the long-term issue, I think, is that China would love to see that happen. And if they're not already helping fuel social media to help fuel these type of narratives to keep America further and further divided. I think there's a double-edged sword if China plays this way. And the reason being is that if America does collapse into various authoritarian statelets, then it becomes a significant blow to the Chinese economy, as well as fear, because you don't know which state is going to take control of the nuclear weapons, if any do. Now, here is the interesting point that no one has spoken about, because this normally takes 20 to 50 years historically. So in other words, anyone who's a kid now, they'll be experiencing this later on. And that is that any authoritarian regime or ideological regime that gets into power ultimately collapses, because what got it into power is what weakens it once it's in power. And what happens is that, let's say that, for example, in theory, Christian nationalism won and took over the US and started purging the education system and the legal system, etc. They would feel immense triumph by its followers, and they would feel happy and elated and all of that type of thing. But what would then happen is that various Christian facets will then start to recognize that they are not actually the same religion. The little things that seem different now will become massive down the track. This is something I experienced in Lebanon during the Civil War, when Christians started killing each other 15 years into the Civil War. And so what happened was that this person made the sign of the cross this way, the other ones made the sign of the cross the other way. So this was already a difference. So you start to see a them and an us, and these differences we'll say metastasize in the mind to the point where these statelets will actually fracture, and you end up having, let's say Protestant Christians here, Catholic Christians there, Orthodox Christians here. And this is something, you'll see it in Islam as well. You saw that the Shia and the Sunnah start to split. So normally, a pluralistic society, once it collapses, makes way to an authoritarian society, which itself can't sustain itself. So that's sort of the long version. There's a much longer analysis I did, but we'll stick to that for now because we've been talking for 12 minutes. And that's about it, really. Take from that what you wish, and good luck with whatever decisions you make in the long term. And if you make the wrong one, then hello, China. Forgive me, I don't yet speak Chinese. 早上好 and 再见. That's all I know. Sorry. Take life one smack at a time.